When we know somebody who is blind, it's only then we appreciate the things that we take for granted. In the Gospel today, we hear of a man who is blind. Blind people in his time were living in the dark. They begged to survive, and they were dependent on others. Their disability was seen as a curse from God. They were treated as nobodies. And Jesus sees the man and he heals him of his disability. There are two kinds of blindness: physical blindness and spiritual. In this case, he was physically blind and he received physical sight. He was spiritually blind and he received spiritual sight. He came to see Jesus as the light of the world. It was a long and painful journey for a person who was called to see life in a new way. And as a result, he makes a commitment to follow and worship Jesus. And following his healing of blindness, he was to endure cross-examination from the Jews and the Pharisees. They couldn't accept that Jesus healed on the Sabbath day. These are the so-called experts on God. And they make life difficult for him. And they oppose him at every opportunity. And they reject his account. But the stronger his awareness and insight of who Jesus really is. And he comes to see Jesus as a prophet, as the one from God who can perform wonderful healing. He's a humble man, and he's able to see clearly, while the Pharisees are arrogant and they are unable to see. The world proclaims there are none so blind as those who do not wish to see. This gospel proclaims there are none so blind as those who know to see. They become more and more blind, and it reflects religious people who become complacent and they think to know God's will, and they have become more intolerant and more violent towards those who oppose them. Yes, they had religion, but they had no compassion or love of Jesus. They were blind to the suffering and injustice around them. The blind man moves towards sight, towards spiritual sight. The Pharisees progress towards spiritual blindness. But in it, we see humility and arrogance. And we can ask ourselves, where do we fit in? Are we humble or are we arrogant? I think we all can recall saying, I never realized it was like this. I was blind. I was in the dark. If only I had known. Yes, we all have blind spots, and we can live in denial and be caught up in our own agendas. We see in the world today torture, greed, and blindness of many kinds, such as racial violence, ethnic cleansing, and prejudice. We see the speck in others, but we cannot see it in ourselves. We may be blind to our own prejudice, our own intolerance, arrogance, self-righteousness, attitudes, and many subtle variations. We may be blind to the poverty and injustice and pain that is around us. And perhaps we deny the evidence of this, and we use pious language in order to get out of it. We're invited this Lent to ask the Lord to remove the cause of our blindness, such as anger, jealousy, self-centeredness, and hardness of heart. We are reminded that Jesus sees the man and he heals him. We are invited to see and also to act. But then in humility, we may think of ourselves like the man when our blindness is healed, when our eyes were opened to see what we need to change. Perhaps we relate to the Lord in a newer and deeper way. We relate better to our friends and our families. And perhaps the light of Jesus' message is inviting us to give ourselves more to the poor and to those who are in need. We may experience the light to move away from a relationship that is not life-giving and to live more simply. For some, light is where we're able to admit, I suffer from an addiction and I need help. You realized you're being called to something deeper and something more life-giving. I think we're reminded today that the Lord comes to us in unexpected ways, but the Pharisees were not open to accept this. God is close at hand in Jesus, who is ready to heal us and bring light into the dark corner of our lives, to places we might not like to look into, but during Lent we're invited to consider. For each of us this Lent, Jesus is passing by and he sees our condition. And maybe we're coming to know Jesus like the blind man, coming to know him slowly and coming to believe in him. And we have the sign of Jesus as we celebrate the Eucharist, as we hear him through his word. As we journey during this Lent, we can all ask ourselves, Lord, open my eyes that I may see. Lord, increase my faith. May the mind of Jesus increasingly become the light in which I judge everything. Perhaps I need to ask forgiveness for the times I was blind and did not act and see as Jesus did. I like the prayer of William Barclay, which says, Lord, three things I pray: to see you more clearly, to love you more dearly, and know you more nearly. And the more we know him, the greater he becomes, the greater our sight and the light that we will share.